This is Emily Kavanaugh presenting a school-wide lesson plan to strengthen literacy at Downingtown West High School. The literacy needs I've identified at my own school are also those that researchers agree are needs most secondary schools have. In elementary schools, the district's teachers and students work their tails off in settings that provide integrated literacy instruction, focus on vocabulary, and give students frequent opportunities for reading and writing in multiple contexts. It's not unique to our district that these aspects of literacy crumble as contents are taught in isolation, starting in middle school, which removes opportunities for team collaboration across contents. Additionally, it's rare to see secondary teachers effectively focusing on vocab, reading, and writing in the disciplines outside of English and language arts. Debate about what literacy looks like is a barrier to change, but teachers can make practical changes in their own classrooms immediately. Making changes that center around content vocabulary seem like the best place to start steering an institution in the right direction. So what can we do? Teachers can limit their own airtime and allow students to discuss and explore content vocab in context. Research suggests we should also avoid using lists of vocab words and choose to focus on quality and depth rather than quantity and coverage. I know, you're thinking, I have a curriculum. There are state standards. There's no time. The good thing is, students who systematically explore and discuss quality vocab words in context become better at reading and writing to learn new content, which creates a positive cycle as students learn more vocab even easier, and then they learn to read and write and use those skills even more as the cycle continues. This lesson plan hits the 4 big aspects of literacy that have the biggest returns on investment for our students: vocab, reading, writing, and discussion. The plan is actually adaptable for every content and naturally differentiates for students by providing multiple entry points in almost every learning task. So prior to implementing this lesson, teachers are going to need a reading from a unit that you are in currently, a potential list of vocab words that students will pick out from that reading. And then there is a slides presentation that teachers can follow, or this is adaptable to do like making a worksheet or putting the sentence frames on index cards. So it's really flexible for teachers in multiple departments to really hone this lesson and make it their own, but also have a big impact on student success. So we have students reading first a content-specific article. This should be done individually, provided that students have all the tools that they need to pick apart a reading. They've had experience reading before, or it's been modeled for them. Then the students, while they're reading or after they're reading, they should summarize what they've read in writing, and then they want to identify the key vocab from the excerpt or the reading provided. When students are finished individually, they're going to get in groups, and then students will discuss their own summaries and then use Post-it notes for each key vocab word that they have identified. So one person can write with a Post-it note pad. They all agree that one word is really important, so they put that one word on the Post-it note. And then they're able to post those stickies somewhere visible where the entire class can see it, so on the front board or on a bulletin board. And then the teacher should wrangle the students back as a whole group instruction to talk about the vocab words. Which ones are repeated a lot? Which ones seem important? Maybe using some questioning strategies about how the students are going to use them in our class. And as we do this, like making sure that we're using best practices, that when we have our students in groups, we're using like roles that we make our students organize. And when we have our whole group discussions, it's a norm that students aren't talking to each other in private conversations. And then it's potentially a good idea to call students individually without them raising their hands, just so everybody's involved. So as the discussion of the vocab is occurring, the teacher should make like a formal final list of agreed upon vocab words, and students can copy the list so they have it. And students should summarize with it for another opportunity just to write and process. They should summarize what the class was saying about the vocab And if the teacher wanted to provide, depending on the level of students, some scaffolding questions or some sentence frames or sentence starters for that part, that would work, but it depends on the level of student. You may not need that. So then after this quiet time that we have where students are sort of taking another moment to process the vocab discussion, the teachers can put the students in partners and start a discussion sort of back and forth about the list of vocab words that we have indicated as a class that are important. So one example would be that partner A chooses 2 words, and then partner B can describe why those 2 words go together or describe how those 2 words are different. Maybe partner B then will identify 2 words that go together, and then partner A has to identify a 3rd word from the list and then explain why those go together. There's a Google slide that can be provided to the staff that sort of has this step-by-step laid out, or if teachers are comfortable, they can create a worksheet, or departments can kind of discuss how they want to deal with that, whether it's formally on a worksheet or you just let your students sort of have at it, engage in the discourse, and go from there. So to summarize at the end of this, whether it's 2 periods or 1 block, at the end, the class should gather back together as a whole group. And the teacher can just do a quick summary and say, okay, how do you describe this word? How are we going to use this one? What's the definition of this one? How are these 2 related? Kind of calling on people to summarize the words just to close the lesson. And then just for encouragement, a little bit of like a positive environment, I usually have my students clap or snap their fingers after a person correctly can describe a word, just to encourage each other and make sure everyone's kind of focusing at the end of the lesson. So what is unique, most unique, I think, about this lesson is that this is a pass-it-on lesson. So we're going to need to implement this systematically. It has to be building wide if we do want our students as a whole to grow in literacy. And then teachers are going to need to take a risk and know that this is a time investment, potentially. However, it's going to be a great way to just grow as a teacher, and hopefully we can sort of reflect about the lesson and then tweak it if need be and figure out like what do we need to do for the next year. So the way, just as a quick description of how this would work, we start in one content, and then that one content, say for example, English, which is really already hopefully familiar with literacy, they're going to pick some quality words, and then they're going to do the lesson. They'll implement it with all their classes. And then one of the English representatives might go meet with the history department and say, here's what worked, here's what didn't, here's a debrief. Then the history department can implement it. And then the history department representative can meet with the math department. And then the math department representative can meet with the science department. So this is something that can be done with all core classes 1 year. And then maybe the next year we move on to the encore classes or the secondary types of classes that are in the building. So that's something that makes this lesson really work, because it hits all of those key aspects of literacy that students need. At the same time, all the teachers can access it, and all of the students can access it because it's differentiated to certain levels, the different entry levels for the students. And as the teachers are more familiar and continue to discuss and reflect, then they hone it, they make it better, and then the students are engaging more in the reading, the writing, the vocabulary, and the discussion. And then hopefully that all makes for a core set of go-to tactics to really start to change the literacy mindset in the building at Downingtown West. So as a staff member, I would want to ask these 5 questions. What are some aspects of Downingtown West that would support a pass-it-along lesson plan like this one? What are some perceived barriers? What parts of this lesson do you see yourself using in your own content? Which parts of this lesson do you think would be problematic? And then what are some ideas that you have to tweak the lesson plan? Collecting this data will help the building leaders sort of figure out how to make sure that this goes flawlessly.